Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Most people remember it as that game that kicked my ass harder than Dark Souls. The one where you fought a guy on a horse like 17 times and questioned your entire gaming career. But here's what nobody talks about. Sekiro isn't really about a ninja with a prosthetic arm. It's about what happens when an entire society becomes so terrified of endings that it poisons itself trying to live forever. And I mean that literally. The whole game is about people who refuse to let things die. Empires, traditions, themselves, and how that refusal turns everything rotten. Today, we're diving into Ashina, this gorgeous decaying feudal Japan setting, and looking at it through a sociology lens, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Sekiro is a game about a civilization eating itself alive, one honorable decision at a time. Grab some tea, this one's gonna hurt. Part 1. The Kingdom That Couldn't Let Go. Okay, so Ashina, when you first arrive, it's beautiful, right? Cherry blossoms, ancient temples, that classic samurai aesthetic. But then you start noticing the details. Abandoned villages, soldiers fighting over scraps, monks who've gone completely insane. Everywhere you look, there's rot, literal disease spreading through the population. And here's the thing, Ashina is already dead. It just refuses to admit it. This kingdom lost its wars. Its enemies are at the gates. The old ways don't work anymore. By every metric, this society should have collapsed, adapted, or transformed into something new, but it doesn't. Because the people in power found a way to delay death itself, through the divine dragon's immortality, and now everyone's trapped in this zombie state where nothing can die, but nothing can really live either. There's this French sociologist, Émile Durkheim, who talked about anomie, basically when a society's moral structure breaks down, when the old rules stop making sense, but nobody knows what should replace them. That's Ashina. Everyone's still performing the rituals, samurai still talk about honor, shinobi still follow their codes, but you can feel how hollow it all is. They're going through the motions of a social order that died years ago. I remember this moment. You're walking through Ashina Castle, and there's this soldier just standing guard, alone. Everyone around him is dead or dying, the castle's falling apart, and he's just doing his job, because what else would he do? The structure tells him to stand there, so he stands there. That's the horror of it. Not monsters, not demons, just the inertia of a system that's forgotten why it exists. This is a civilization that can't imagine a future, only a longer, rotting version of the present. Part 2. The Iron Cage of Loyalty. Let's talk about Wolf, our boy Sekiro himself. On the surface, he's this badass shinobi who fights through impossible odds to protect his lord. Classic hero stuff. But from a sociological perspective, Wolf is the perfect example of what happens when a society weaponizes loyalty. See, there's this sociologist Max Weber who talked about the iron cage, how modern rationalized systems trap people in structures of their own making. You build rules to create order, and eventually those rules become a prison. In Ashina, that prison is the shinobi code, the concept of absolute loyalty to your master. Wolf doesn't just choose to serve Kuro, he's bound to him. By training, by tradition, by an entire social system that has stripped away his ability to even conceive of saying no. His identity isn't person who happens to be loyal, it's tool that belongs to someone else. And the tragedy, the tragedy, is that Wolf is probably the most genuinely loyal person in the entire game. In a world full of betrayers and schemers, he's the one guy who actually believes in the code. But his loyalty doesn't save anything, it just perpetuates the cycle. There's a line late in the game where someone tells Wolf something like, "You're just a shinobi, a tool," and Wolf doesn't even deny it, because that's what he was made to be. The society that shaped him didn't create a person, it created a function. Kuro, meanwhile, is this divine heir, supposedly the most important person in Ashina, and he's a prisoner, a child with godlike blood who can't even choose his own fate. Everyone reveres him, while simultaneously denying him agency. That's feudalism in a nutshell, right? Power flows downward, but so does all the suffering. The people at the top are trapped by their own status. The people at the bottom die for wars they never voted for. And everyone in the middle, people like Wolf, they're just ground up by the machine, told it's honorable and expected to smile about it. The code that once held society together now strangles everyone who follows it. Part 3. When monks become mad scientists. Okay, we need to talk about Senpu Temple, because this is where Sekiro gets really dark in a quiet, disturbing way. So you've got this Buddhist monastery up in the mountains, monks seeking enlightenment, right? Meditation, transcendence, becoming one with the universe, all that good spiritual stuff. Except when you get there, it's a nightmare factory. They're experimenting on children, trying to create perfect, immortal beings. There are these things, these failed experiments stumbling around, the monks have completely abandoned any concept of enlightenment and replaced it with this twisted alchemy. From a sociological angle, this is what happens when religious institutions lose their transcendent purpose and start chasing power instead. Durkheim talked about how religion creates social cohesion by connecting people to something sacred, something beyond everyday life. It gives meaning to suffering, context to death, but the monks of Senpu Temple have inverted that. They're not trying to give meaning to death, they're trying to eliminate it, and in doing so, they've lost everything that made their spirituality meaningful in the first place. Their rituals aren't about connecting with the divine anymore. They're laboratory procedures. Their temple isn't a sanctuary, it's a research facility where the sacred and the profane have completely collapsed into each other. And here's what gets me, none of them seem to think they've done anything wrong. There's no moment of, are we the baddies? They genuinely believe they're pursuing purity, enlightenment, transcendence. That's what makes it scary. It's not cartoonish evil. It's institutional decay, wrapped in the language of virtue. The monks are still wearing their robes, still chanting their prayers, still following their hierarchies. But the soul of the thing, the actual point of it all, has been completely gutted. Religion once gave meaning to death. Now, it's just trying to eradicate it, and the result is hell. Part 4. Immortality as currency, or late-stage feudalism. Alright, let's get Marxist for a second. At the center of Sekiro's entire plot is blood, specifically the divine heir's blood, which grants immortality, and everyone wants it. The Ashina Lord wants it to keep his army strong. The Interior Ministry wants it to control the kingdom. The monks want it for their experiments. Even Wolf, in a way, is bound to it. His resurrection power comes from Kuro. Now, Marx talked about how capitalism alienates workers from the products of their labor, right? You make something, but you don't own it. Your labor becomes a commodity controlled by someone else. In Sekiro, this alienation goes all the way down to biological existence itself. Life, literal life and death, has become a resource, a means of production. The divine heir's body is a factory, and everyone else is either labor or raw material. The soldiers of Ashina don't die for honor or country anymore. They die and undie because their commanders have access to resurrection technology. The monks don't pursue enlightenment. They extract purity from human bodies like miners digging for ore. Even the rot spreading through the population is a side effect of this immortality economy. The common people literally get sick from the elite's refusal to die. It's exploitation made biological, made sacred. There's this moment where you meet an NPC who's coughing, clearly dying from dragon rot, and they're just accepting it. Like it's natural. Like the rot is just part of life now. Something that happens when important people need to keep coming back. Nobody's even angry about it. That's how normalized it's become. In Sekiro's world, immortality isn't a miracle. It's a reals controlled by the few and suffered by the many. Part 5. Violence as bureaucracy. Something that struck me on my second playthrough. The violence in Sekiro isn't chaotic. It's organized. Like, you've got the Ashina military executing deserters, the Interior Ministry's assassination protocols, the monks' ritualized experiments, even Wolf's shinobi prosthetics. Each one is a carefully designed tool for specific types of killing. This isn't berserk rage, it's procedural violence. And nobody questions it. Because in Ashina, violence has been so thoroughly absorbed into the social structure that it's just how things work. You don't debate whether it's right to kill, you debate the proper form of killing, the honorable way, the efficient way. This is Foucault's whole thing about disciplinary power. Modern, or in this case feudal societies don't control people through random brutality. They control through routine, through training bodies to perform violence according to rules. Wolf is the ultimate product of this system. Look at his moveset. It's not wild improvisation, it's precision, technique. He's been surgically modified, emotionally conditioned, and trained since childhood to be the perfect instrument of death. He's so good at being a tool that he stopped being a person. And the game rewards you for this. The better you perform your role, the more efficiently you execute the procedures of violence, the more you progress. It's brilliant and disturbing, because the game is making you complicit in the same system it's critiquing. There's this boss fight, Owl, your mentor, and it's framed as this ultimate betrayal. But sociologically, Owl's just doing what the system trained him to do, survive, manipulate, use the tools, including Wolf, at his disposal. The real betrayal isn't personal, it's structural. The shinobi system itself is designed to produce people like Owl, and people like Wolf, who can't imagine defying him even when it means dying. The violence doesn't break the system. The violence is the system. Part 6. A society addicted to its own past. What I think Sekiro is really about Underneath all the sword fights and prosthetic arms, it's about what happens when a society becomes so obsessed with preserving itself that it forgets what it was supposed to be preserving in the first place. Every faction in the game is trying to stop time. The Ashina Lord is fighting to keep his dynasty alive, even though the dynasty is already a corpse. The monks are chasing physical immortality, even though it requires destroying everything sacred. Even Kuro, the divine heir, spends the whole game trying to sever immortality, which is itself an attempt to restore some imagined natural order. And Wolf? He exists in a literal loop, dying and coming back, repeating his duty forever. Nobody in Ashina can imagine forward. They can only imagine preservation. And that's how you know a civilization is terminal, when its only goal is to not change. Sociologically, this is what happens when a system loses its capacity for renewal, when the structures built to protect life end up suffocating it. There's this concept in ecology, succession. After a forest fire, new growth happens. Dead wood gets cleared out and fresh life emerges. It's brutal, but it's necessary. Ashina has spent centuries preventing the fire, and now everything's so choked with dead wood that nothing new can grow. The rot you see everywhere isn't just disease, it's stagnation made visible. Part 7. The Normalisation of Suffering. You know what's the most quietly horrifying thing about Sekiro? It's not the bosses or the difficulty or the body horror, it's how normal everyone treats the suffering. You meet a merchant who's coughing blood, dragon rot, and he's just like, oh yeah, this happens when important people resurrect too much. Anyway, wanna buy some stuff? There are soldiers who know they're fighting a lost war, defending a kingdom that's already fallen, and they just keep fighting. Because what else would they do? The monks continue their experiments, the nobles continue their schemes, the peasants continue dying quietly in their villages. Nobody rebels, because rebellion would require being able to imagine that things could be different. And that's the real horror of Ashina. Not that it's cruel, but that the cruelty has become invisible. It's just how things are. This is what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil, though she was talking about something way worse. But the principle applies. When suffering becomes routine, when it's baked into the structure of everyday life, people stop seeing it as wrong. They see it as Tuesday. Wolf himself never questions the code. Kuro feels guilty about the dragon rot, but doesn't actually do anything until the very end. The sculptor's been sitting in that temple for years, knowing everything's falling apart, and he just carves Buddhas. Everyone's complicit because the system doesn't give them a framework for being anything else. The world of Sekiro is what happens when survival replaces meaning and nobody remembers there was ever a difference. Part 8. The endings, or what happens after the end of the world. So Sekiro has multiple endings, right? And I think each one is basically a different sociological trajectory for a dying civilization. The Severance ending. You sever immortality, kill the divine dragon, end the curse, let death return to the world. This is revolution. It's saying, the system is poisoned, we need to tear it down and start over. It's painful, it's uncertain, but it's the only ending that actually allows for renewal. Sociologically, this is what has to happen when a social order has become so corrupt that reform is impossible. You have to let the old world die so something new can emerge. The purification ending. You sacrifice yourself to save Kuro and maybe find a way to cure dragon rot without destroying everything. This is tragic reformism. You're trying to save the system through personal sacrifice, working within the structure even though the structure itself is the problem. It's noble, it's heartbreaking. And historically, it almost never works, because one good person can't fix institutional rot. The Shura ending. You embrace violence, betray Kuro, kill everyone, become the demon. This is total collapse. When a society's contradictions become so unbearable that violence consumes itself in an infinite loop. No more pretense of order or honor, just power eating power until there's nothing left. It's the ending where the violence that was always at the heart of the system finally tears off its mask and admits what it's always been. And here's the brilliant part. All three are believable outcomes for a civilization at the edge. You can see real historical empires that chose each path. Some that tried to reform and destroyed themselves. Some that doubled down on violence and collapsed into warlord states. And rare cases where people actually managed to let the old order die and build something new from the ashes. Sekiro doesn't tell you which one is right. It just shows you the consequences of each choice and asks, what kind of ending do you want for a world this broken? At the end, Ashina didn't fall because of external enemies or natural disasters. It fell because the people in power became so terrified of death, of change, of endings, of losing control, that they turned immortality into a weapon and a prison, and everyone else got caught in the gears. The soldiers dying for a kingdom that doesn't exist, the monks torturing children in the name of purity, the peasants coughing themselves to death from someone else's resurrection. Wolf himself, the most loyal warrior in a system where loyalty has become poison. None of them are evil, really. They're just trapped in a structure that's forgotten how to adapt, how to grieve, how to let go. And that's the real lesson, I think. Not that suffering is inevitable or that power corrupts, though those are true too, but that the most dangerous moment for any society is when it stops being able to imagine its own ending. Because when you can't imagine an ending, you can't imagine a new beginning either. You just, forever, clinging to a past that was never as perfect as you remember it, sacrificing the future for one more day of a present that stopped being worth living in years ago. Anyway, go play Sekiro, die a lot, question your life choices, but maybe also think about what it means that a game about samurai and giant apes is also somehow a perfect metaphor for what happens when institutions forget they're supposed to serve people, not the other way around. Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you think I'm reading way too much into a game where you can grapple hook a chicken. Thanks for watching.